You don't tell your pappy how to court the electorate. We ain't one at a time in here. We're mass communicating.
Oh, yes. That's a powerful new force.
Hi there. How you doing?
Cinderella story.
You want answers?
We're on a mission from God.
Inconceivable! Take your stinking paws off me!
I'm afraid I can't do that.
Have fun storming the castle!
Hey everybody, welcome to Story Cauldron, finding the folktales, fables, and philosophies behind your favorite Hollywood films. I'm Bobby the Movie Dude.
I'm Anthony, the philosophy guy.
And I'm Garrett, and I'm here.
And this podcast is where we get to sit down and watch the movies that we love and look behind them to see where the stories are coming from. Just like how Tolkien described in his essay on fairy stories, every tale that we tell is built on the backs of other tales. And he described this as a big pot of soup where stories and historical events and myths and legends and folktales all get thrown into the pot and mixed up, and every generation spoons it out in a new way. So we tell new stories, but they always depend on older ones, and that's what we get to explore.
And today we're checking out one of my favorite movies. The Coen Brothers make high school English twice as musical and 3 times as sweaty. Oh, brother, where art thou? Huh. So let's start with the movie itself.
Well, it's the epic story of the Odyssey set in the depressed American South. What more is there? I mean, everybody had to study it in school, right? Well, except for me, because I never did. But I know.
You missed out. Actually, maybe you didn't miss out. But yeah, I remember talking through the Odyssey in school. I remember watching the actual Odyssey movie with Lorenzo Lamas as Odysseus. Oh. But I think I like... I think I like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou more.
I love Oh Brother, Where Art Thou.
I love the fact that the tagline is they have a plan but not a clue, because I feel like that's kind of us.
Yeah, we plan this podcast, but we have no clue what we're doing. That sums it up pretty well. So
the Coen Brothers are loved by all sorts of people. I mean, they're kind of a famous director pair and screenwriters. And this movie... Although they've said that when they sat down to start writing the script, they weren't planning on making a story based on the Odyssey, but they definitely ended up going that route. And in fact, at one point I was listening to an interview where they said they'd actually talked about spoofing the Wizard of Oz.
Oh, that would be amazing.
But there is a little bit of there's one scene at the Ku Klux Klan rally where you kind of get a Wizard of Oz vibe.
Yeah,
when
with
they're sneaking
the marching
in.
And sneaking
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but by the end of the script writing process, they've got Depression era Odyssey in spades. So.
Well, yeah, they actually have it credited as Homer is credited as one of the writers of the movie. So I thought that was pretty awesome. I mean, you can throw Homer in there.
It's always a good idea to give credit where credit is due.
Exactly.
So before we go too much further, what is the Odyssey? We've mentioned it a couple of times. I mean, what is that?
Well, it is an epic poem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
That's the best I could come up with right now. Epic poem by Homer talking about the Greeks and the Trojans, right?
Well, it's the sequel to the Iliad.
Yes.
And so the Trojans are kind of in it, but it's after the Trojan War, and Odysseus, or Ulysses, he's called both. He was one of the Greek soldiers fighting against the Trojans, and now that the war is over, he's trying to get home, and the Odyssey is his story of trying to get home and running into all sorts of problems and delays and getting captured, and sometimes his capturings aren't too bad. He gets kind of pampered and things, but it takes him a really long time to get home.
So long, in fact, that he hears about his wife hooking up with another dude.
Quite a few, actually.
Quite a few other dudes.
Well, there's a lot of suitors
yes.
who are coming to try and, because I don't think she's a princess, but she's well off, or he was well off, and so there's all these guys that want the money, and so they're coming to try and get Odysseus's wife to pick them as her new husband. And the Odyssey, it's a very satisfying ending because Odysseus sneakily, like he disguises himself as a beggar and comes into his house. And to make a long story short, he ends up fighting all of the suitors. And at the end, they're all like lying dead on the floor because Odysseus is this big, strong hero, great warrior, and he defeats all of them. And then he wins his wife back.
I'm sure that made quite a mess in their house.
Well, yeah. It's, I guess, when you've got slaves to clean things up for you, you don't have to worry about that so much.
So yeah, it's the journey home. So, O Brother, Where Art Thou follows that pretty much to a T. He finds out while he's in prison, his wife is engaged to this Waldrip guy. And so he decides to tell a story of a treasure to two men that he's chained with, and then just to make it home so he could stop this wedding. I mean, the two men that he's chained to kind of personify the two things about Odysseus's crew. I mean, you've got the mutiny portion, and you've got the what would you call it? The foolish portion, or the
yeah. So you've got so the three guys are Everett, Pete, and Delmar. Everett, that's actually his middle name. His first name is Ulysses. This is the main guy. This is Odysseus, Ulysses. But through most of the movies called
Everett McGill.
Everett. He's the Dapper Dan man with the cool hair. That's George Clooney's character. And then his two compatriots on the journey are Pete, who does actually kind of mutiny against him at one point.
He's played by John Turturro.
And then Delmar, who is he's a comedic relief for a lot of the movie. He's just kind of the happy-go-lucky dumb guy.
And he's played by Tim Blake Nelson,
who actually has apparently a classics degree from Brown.
That's amazing.
One of the Coen brothers said that when they were shooting the movie, he was the only one of them of anybody on the set who had actually read the Odyssey all the way through.
Completely. I have not. I've done the shortened version.
Sure.
Just because I don't have an extra month and a half to just sit down and read. Mm-hmm. But it's a good story.
So yeah, in the movie, Everett convinces these two guys to break free from the chain gang and run away to try and stop his wife from marrying this other guy. Now, Pete and Delmar think that they're going to go find treasure. That's what their motivation is. And there's this...
Pretty sure Everett says something about knocking over an armored car and then burying that next to his house.
So that's how he convinces them. But as they go through, as they go along the way to try and get home, they meet all of these different people who embody different characterizations of the sorts of people that Odysseus meets in the Odyssey.
Exactly.
And so the movie was popular when it first came out. I mean, people liked it. It hasn't... it's still relatively well known and well loved, but largely because of its soundtrack more than anything else.
Such a good soundtrack.
Yeah, I mean, award-winning soundtrack.
Yeah, won a Grammy. Or
several
Grammys. Yeah.
It won Country Music Awards. It won all sorts of things. Not so much on the Oscars side,
but nonetheless, it's still a really good movie.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember seeing this movie. I think I was in high school, maybe almost in high school when it first came out. And this was one of those movies that my friends and we were quoting to each other all the time. I still can remember my best friend in high school going over and over and over again, "We thought you was a toad" line. I don't know. We just thought that was the funniest thing.
We thought you was a toad.
Let's just kind of go through the movie and just hit element in a chronological order. I think that would be the easiest way to get through this one.
You mean like how it lines up with the Odyssey?
How it lines up with the Odyssey, okay. And then there's a few other aspects of this that pull from the South and the blues and other aspects that we want to talk about. Mm-hmm. We can just hit those when we get there.
Okay.
Sound like a good idea?
Uh-huh.
Works for me.
All right, so let's start off with the beginning. They're in the chain gang.
And this was one of the things that I had never thought about until getting ready for this podcast. But the names of Pete and Delmar. Do you know what I mean when I mention the names Scylla and Charybdis?
Nope.
I know the names.
These are two monsters from the Odyssey. And sometimes it's a phrase sometimes people will say if they want to kind of sound smart. It's a fancy way to say between a rock and a hard place, because in the Odyssey, one of the things that Odysseus has to get past when he's on the ship with his crew are these two sea monsters that are both. They're really close to each other, and so if you avoid one, you get closer to the other. You have to thread the needle basically to get between Scylla and Charybdis. And one was this lived on this big rock and was this big monster with all these heads and teeth. And then the other was like a massive whirlpool that would pull you under and destroy your ship. So again, between a rock and a hard place. Everett is stuck between Scylla and Charybdis. Pete and Delmar. Pete, or Peter, it's if you think, maybe you know it from the Bible or elsewhere, it means stone or rock. And Delmar literally means of the sea. So he's constantly stuck between Scylla and Charybdis for the entire movie because his two partners in crime are these monsters going with him. I just thought that was one of those things I'd never noticed before. There's a lot of layers to this movie that I got.
Oh my so many layers.
Gosh,
I'd never even thought about that.
Right?
And even when I was looking through it, I was like, what?
Bam. They really, once the Coen Brothers latched on to the Odyssey framework, they went all ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
So they're on the chain gang.
They're on the chain gang. And, the movie opens up there, and then you walk, they're running through the field, and they're trying to get onto the train. Some hilarity ensues, and they're picked up by a blind guy on a handcart, who does this, or gives them a prophecy that they're seeking a treasure, a great treasure, but they won't find it. And then he also says a couple other things in there.
I actually have the prophecy pulled up if you want to hear it.
Yeah, give us the prophecy.
You seek a great fortune, you three who are now in chains. You will find a fortune, though it will not be the one you seek. But first you must travel a long and difficult road, a road fraught with peril. You shall see things wonderful to tell. You shall see a cow on the roof of a cotton house. And so many startlements. I cannot tell you how long this road shall be. But fear not the obstacles in your path, for fate has vouchsafed your reward.
Ooh, that's a good word.
Yeah, it's weird to read. Though the road may wind, your hearts grow weary, still shall ye follow them, even unto your salvation.
All right.
It's powerful.
That's a lot of words.
Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Like every good prophecy.
Exactly.
You can tell it's deep, and you don't really know what it means.
And you can tell that they're thinking the same thing, because they're like, And then Pete is the one that says, he says that we're not going to get the treasure.
He's real focused on
really
that.
focused on the prophecy. We're not going to get the treasure.
And this is a pretty common element in not just the Odyssey, but a lot of Greek tragedies. Mm-hmm. The blind seer or prophet who gives oracles, who actually will give guidance. In the Odyssey, it's a character named Tiresias, who shows up in a few different Greek stories. Like if you know the story of Oedipus Rex, Tiresias is the same one who reveals the truth to Oedipus. And in the Odyssey, Tiresias is the one who actually tells, finally, Odysseus how to get home. He's the one who makes... who gives him some of the most useful information that leads to Odysseus finally returning home. And then in the Odyssey, gives him a weird prophecy about how he has to take an oar? What is it? He has to take an oar inland far enough until someone doesn't recognize it, until they don't know what an oar is. And then he has to plant it, and then that's like when he will truly be at peace or something like that. And so that's actually how the Odyssey ends, with Odysseus doing that. But yeah, so Tiresias, or does he have a name? Does the man on the handcart have a name?
I don't think so.
It's just blind seer.
Just mysterious man.
Yeah.
I love
he does show up at the very end, though.
Oh, that's right.
So, we'll get to that.
We'll get to that, yeah.
So, anyway, they get this prophecy. They're focused. And you're like, we're not going to get the treasure, right? So, they move on, and they go to Pete's.
His cousin's
house. Yes. Where he takes their chains off, gives him some clothes and some food. And that's where we're really introduced into Everett's character and how he's so proud about his hair and his Dapper Dan pomade. Yeah. So what happens there is that he is betrayed by his cousin.
Yes.
Yeah. We're kind of introduced to, like, Pete's family is like, never trust I can't remember their last name. Well, anyway, never trust, I knew I shouldn't have trusted you. And so they steal a car and they bust out of there until the transmission belt gives way and they're stopped at a general store. And Everett comments that it's a geographical oddity that this place be 2 weeks from everywhere. That's where the story starts moving along a little more.
Is that where the sheriff comes in? Because it's Pete's cousin that calls the sheriff.
Yes, and they set the barn on fire. That's where they steal the car.
Set the barn on fire. That's right.
Yeah, I forgot that little piece of advice.
That'll teach them.
Yeah, set the barn on fire. They steal the car. Best thing is, though, is they throw the torch back towards the police vehicles, and the guy that was lighting the barn on fire dribbled gasoline all the way from the truck to the barn, so their stuff went up in flames.
Oopsie.
And they
All of their ammo.
So, it buys them a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm. That and it's just hilarious for the rest of us that are watching.
Yes.
So that sheriff ends up becoming one of the main antagonists of the film.
Yes.
Sheriff Cooley. Just like how in the Odyssey, the main antagonist, there's several antagonists, but Odysseus is not well liked by Poseidon, the god of the sea. The Greek god of the sea, Poseidon, is not a fan of Odysseus and is repeatedly trying to sink his ship, sending storms, causing problems, kind of chasing him to try and prevent him from coming home because of something that happens in the middle of the book that we'll get to. But Sheriff Cooley is kind of the stand-in for Poseidon, chasing after the boys, chasing after Everett, because he's very much he kind of reminds me of Javert from Les Mis, that he's got this
vendetta.
He thinks it's his righteous duty to catch these criminals who are running away, and even at the end, we're jumping ahead, but even at the end, Sheriff Cooley still kind of he's not happy when they get pardoned, and because he still thinks that he should be able to stop them. But this sheriff and his whole approach to stopping them is going to be real similar to Poseidon's attitude towards Odysseus.
Speaking of Poseidon, as soon as they leave that geographical oddity 2 weeks from everywhere, they wind up having lunch by a pond. You start seeing all these people in white walking through, and Delmar takes a break, offering everybody gopher, and says, it must be a congregation. And they go down to the water to basically a mass baptism. So in the Odyssey, the baptism congregation, it harkens to the Lotus Eater that the crew kind of blindly follows, right?
Yeah, that's one of the islands that Odysseus and his crew come to. Like they island hop. They go from place to place, and all the islands, there's a monster or there's something. And they find on one island there are these, is it a flower or a fruit? It's some kind of plant that sounds basically like if heroin had a baby with cocaine and then injected it with meth. I mean, it's like the most, it's like the craziest drug ever that as soon as you get one hit of this lotus, you never do anything else except just sit there and keep eating it and getting high. And so Odysseus loses some of his crew. Like the further you go through the Odyssey, it's like a horror movie. The crew gets smaller and smaller. Yeah. And so he loses a good portion of his crew to the Lotus Eaters.
And so it kind of the same in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Because Pete and Delmar run into the water and they're just like, we've been saved.
We've been saved.
We can't be bad men anymore. We can't be, your partners in crime because we've been saved. And it kind of follows throughout the rest of the story that they don't want to be bad men anymore. And they just kind of let Everett do all of the shady stuff.
What were they in prison for? Do you remember at the beginning?
Knocking over that Piggly Wiggly.
Oh, that's right. That was Delmar.
It's like, I thought you said you were set up. Well, I lied about that, which he absolved as well. So, and then Pete, I don't remember what he was in for, but he was like, what, days from getting out of prison?
Yeah, that's all I remember. He was like 2 weeks away from...
Now I'm going to be in prison until I'm 87.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty interesting, like the whole dynamic and what they're willing to go through. And
yeah. So they get baptized.
They get baptized, and they're like, yeah, no, we don't have to go back to jail. It's like, it doesn't work that way.
That's not how any of this works.
State of Mississippi is a little more hard on criminals than...
Yeah, especially in 1937 or 34, whatever this was.
Sometime within the Depression, yeah. But so he kind of loses his partners in crime, but he still has these travel companions. Mm-hmm. And then here's the big switch in irony is they're driving after they're saved, and they come to a crossroads. And I have a feeling you guys all know where this is going. They pick up Tommy Johnson, who tells the rest of them that he just sold his soul to the devil to play this guitar real good, right?
Real good.
Really well. And, Everett comments that he's the only one that's unaffiliated because the other two have been baptized.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot right there because Tommy has his own character that parallels in the Odyssey, but also Tommy Johnson was a real person.
Right. Yeah, Tommy Johnson was a musician in the early part of the 20th century. He often gets confused with Robert Johnson, but they're not related at all. They just have the same last name. But Tommy Johnson, he was from Mississippi, and he played the guitar, and he had a certain amount of fame that came to him. But he intentionally cultivated a persona that involved this story where he had sold his soul to the devil at a crossroads, and so he was kind of trying to encourage people to see him as this bad boy, as this mysterious kind of intense person, and sometimes people tell that same story about Robert Johnson, but it looks like Tommy Johnson did it first. So,
you heard it here.
Yeah.
He was the hipster of the blues.
Oh dear.
So I think it's kind of cool that the Coen Brothers, and they do this with a couple of characters like George Nelson and some of the politicians. Like they took real people from the 20s and 30s in the South and kind of wove them into the story. And I mean, that's the way that Greek myths would often work. They would take real people and weave them in and then just, tell stories about Cyclopses with them. But
well, I mean, you see that in a lot of the stories that we even talk about. They're based on real people, real events, and it's more of an explanation and just kind of the modern mythology is of taking these larger than life characters and weaving them into other stories. So,
and there's definitely a lot of modern mythology surrounding Crossroads, and really the whole idea of selling your soul to the devil is. I mean, it's not entirely modern, but it seems like it's really become more popular in the last century or so. I mean, you see that idea popping up more and more, and especially now with shows like Supernatural and things. That's a huge element of that television show, right?
That's every other episode. I feel like they're at a crossroads and summoning, some demon or a devil.
What do you think of when you hear that? Like, if somebody told you, how would you react if you were in that car and Tommy Johnson said, "Oh yeah, by the way, I just sold my soul to Satan"? I mean, what would your reaction be?
I would have no idea. I would just be like, "Oh, are you sure?
Well, isn't
that's
that
nice?"
Special?
Awkwardly change the subject.
Yeah, just kind of like, well, okay.
Let's turn on the radio to hear Crossroad Blues by Robert Johnson. But yeah, I mean, I feel like in the American South, it's a big one, mostly because the ties to hoodoo and voodoo, and that's you don't really hear about anywhere else in the U.S. besides the South.
Yeah, you have to go down to
Deep South.
You go down to Georgia.
Yeah.
That's where the devil goes when he's looking for a soul to steal.
Yep.
Right?
Well, you even hear stories about the devil doing some shady deals and stuff, even when you're in places like Tennessee. Because I heard plenty of stories when I was down there. Everybody was saying, oh, well, there's this witch, there was this witch, and like each village had their own little story. And then, the village grew into a town, and next thing you know, there's all these different little stories everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. I hadn't really thought about that until just now, but I suppose that is a big element with American stories of witches consorting with the devil. I'm thinking of The Crucible and things like that now.
Yeah.
That you're involved with him in some way, whether
in some
you're
way,
selling
shape, or
your
form.
soul or partnering with him or romancing him or something like that. I mean, there are older stories, going all the way back to the story of Dr. Faustus in Europe. That's going to be a couple of centuries ago, about this famous doctor who supposedly wrote out a contract with Satan to get fame and fortune and all this stuff. And then Christopher Marlowe wrote a pretty famous play about it. And it's even entered the language. A Faustian bargain is this kind of bargain that comes back to bite you in the end. But it does seem to, like, if you want to see it widespread geographically, you go to Tennessee or Mississippi or someplace like that.
Yeah, and it's always that fight of good versus evil where, Satan is bad, and then the people that go to church on Sunday are the ones that are like, there's a witch that lives down the block or whatever.
Oh, so, yeah, we're the good ones because we're at church.
Yeah, well, that's how it works. Sorry, that was sarcasm. If you can't see my face, you can only hear my voice.
I think the thing that strikes me, that I always find odd about these ideas of selling your soul to the devil, is that if you actually look in the Bible, you don't really see anything like that. At no point in Christian scripture does someone sell their soul to the devil. That phrase doesn't appear. The only thing that's kind of like it is the story of the temptation of Christ, where you have Jesus being tempted by Satan, and Satan's promising him all of these things, that if you bow down and worship me, I will give you all the nations of the world. I will make you the king. And Jesus basically tells him to go, buzz off. But that seems like the only real scriptural place where the devil is promising some kind of reward, some kind of tangible reward in this life. If you do this for me, then I will give you this other stuff that you want.
Yeah.
If
you submit and denounce your father,
yeah,
like, don't do what you were meant to do, I'll make this life pleasurable for you.
Yeah. and so I guess, Tommy Johnson is what he's being promised to be able to play the guitar really well, and he is by far not the only musician in history to have had some kind of story like that. I know it's almost a cliche now with some rock or heavy metal groups. If you think of some of the stories with Black Sabbath and things like that. But even before,
just watch the Pick of Destiny.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, Tenacious D.
But yeah, and some of the stories, Paganini in Italy.
We'll go with that.
Like there's some tales loosely attributed to like him selling his soul to the devil to play the violin so well.
And that was 200 years ago.
That
was in the early 19th century.
It's not a long time ago, but it predates the 1920s.
I would love to see like Ozzy Osbourne and Niccolo Paganini playing like a showdown to see who loves the devil more. Like who's going to play the better guitar or violin? Yeah, who shreds harder on the violin in 1827?
Right.
Versus Black Sabbath biting heads off of bats on stage or something.
Well, this whole thing, the whole thing kind of brings up an interesting topic about what the devil actually looks like when he comes to the crossroads.
Ooh.
So, I mean...
He's big and red and has horns and little cloven hooves.
He's got a bifurcated tail.
He's got He's got the pointy tail and Saddam Hussein following him around everywhere, right?
Yeah. That's kind of what Everett comes up with when he's describing the devil. But then Tommy comes through and he says, no, actually, the devil's as white as you.
Oh, I love that.
And large man, hollow voice, kind of like hollow eyes, right? Like dead eyes. And he has a
Big dog
with him, yeah. Which, we can go into like another couple hours about the whole demon dog stories, but we'll leave it at that.
Maybe we'll come back to that some other day.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe we'll do like the Hounds of Baskerville or something.
Yeah.
But, I mean, we can really go into, and he's like, well, the devil looks like you or me. He's not what you would really think of the devil being portrayed as. He looks like us.
And wait, what color is he? He's dressed in all white? Is that what Tommy Johnson says?
If he's dressed in all white,
or he's just white.
He's as white as you.
He's as white as you.
As you. In case you didn't know, Tommy Johnson is played by a black man, so he was a black man. But yeah, it's pretty interesting that they say no, he's white and he looks like you.
Yeah, I mean the description that he gives really sounds to me like a slave owner or one of the people who would go out and hunt for runaway slaves with dogs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you even see that with the sheriff. He's like he's not a big man in stature, but he's imposing, especially with those dark glasses and his hound. He's chasing him across Mississippi.
Yeah. So I think I think the Coen brothers are kind of trying to get you to think again of Sheriff Cooley in that description of the devil, that Poseidon or the sheriff is this evil antagonist.
Well, when we rewatched the movie, my grandma was with us, and she's all like, Homer Stokes is the devil.
Yeah, yeah, he kind of is.
Before she knew that it was, the guy that was running against the incumbent. But we'll get to that in a little bit.
So after they pick up Tommy Johnson, they get to probably the most famous part of the whole movie, the part that everybody loves, where they record the song that won Grammys, the song that was #1 on the Billboard charts.
It's a pretty good song.
It's a pretty good song, yeah. As the Soggy Bottom Boys, they make a couple $100, right?
Something like that. But the way Everett comes up with it, he's all like, well, because the radio station operator is blind as well. And so there's like, we heard that you'll pay us extra if we sing really well into your can. And the guy's like, well, that's true. Just go. We want to hear some good old-timey music, right? So they start singing. The guy loves it. He comes back and says, well, come on in here, sign your names, and we'll get you paid. And he says, well, only 4 of us can write. There's only 4 of them. It's like the 5th one of us can't read, so he'll just have to sign an X.
Yeah.
And, so they end up cheating him out of more money. And, of course, it's not Pete or Delmar because they were saved. It was Everett.
And that's very much like Odysseus in the original story. Odysseus is very quick thinking and very fast with his words. That's one of the things I always remember about Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is the dialogue is just brilliant, especially Everett's. He speaks very quickly, he speaks very eloquently, and
he has the gift of the gab.
He's got the gift of the gab. And that was very much Odysseus. I mean, he more than once manages to talk his way out of danger. And Everett talks his way into a couple of different cons, I suppose.
Yeah. In fact, you find out that he didn't actually knock over an armored truck. He was thrown in jail for practicing law without a license and sweet-talking people, right? So, I mean, that's one of the times that you hear that, okay, his gift of gab has maybe gotten him into a little bit of trouble. And then there's another time where later on in the movie, another character comes in and says, you've been blessed with the gift of gab, much like myself. that kind of gets them into trouble as well. But yeah, so they're at the radio station. They cut this record. So what happens next?
They is it the siren scene is what's next?
Well,
or am I forgetting something?
You're forgetting a little bit. As they're walking out of the radio station, they are introduced to Pappy O'Daniel.
That's right.
Oh,
the governor.
They meet him,
who they broadcast out on the radio, right? And so after that, they are camping out in a barn. Tommy and the 3 escaped convicts, they are out in the woods. The Sheriff Cooley comes in, finds their barn, torches that barn as well. Tommy runs away before the other 3, so that's where they all split.
Yeah, they're separated from Tommy.
They're all separated from Tommy, and this is where we find the 3 convicts walking down the road, and they spot a car coming up in the distance with a bunch of money popping out the back. And they are thus introduced to Babyface Nelson. But he hates being called Babyface. It's George Nelson. Right?
Who also was a real person.
Yes.
Or at least based on a real person.
Yeah,
he was actually a real bank robber. But
I don't know if he actually hated cows.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody can hate cows quite as much as this guy.
Right.
Yeah, so he's being chased by the police. And the 3... main characters get into his car before they realize what's going on, and
some of your folding money's become unstowed.
And Nelson gets in a gun battle with the police while they're driving down the road, and then they pass by a bunch of cows that are just grazing in a pasture, and for some unexplained reason, Nelson hates cows and starts firing his gun into the herd. And
starts killing
cows because he hates these animals.
And the cows kind of create a diversion, and the cops run their cars into the cows.
Yeah. It's kind of graphic, actually.
It makes me sad.
Yeah.
But, in the Odyssey, there's a character affiliated with the cows that kind of joins Odysseus' crew for a little while. And that would be...
Well, I think no, it's not.
Oh, he's not a member, but
so in the Odyssey, one of the other places that they come to, one of the other islands, is where Helios, the sun god, keeps his cattle.
Yes.
And so just like how they come to the island with all the lotus eaters, they come to a different island, and it's where the sun god keeps his herds, and they're not supposed to eat them, but some of his crew
eats them.
Eats them,
yeah.
And so the sun god punishes them by killing them, because that's he takes his vengeance on Odysseus's men by asking Zeus to throw his lightning bolts and punish Odysseus's crew.
Yeah,
for killing his cows.
And then we have George Nelson, who shoots these cows, kills the cows. And then at the very end of the movie, well, not the very, very end, but
close
towards
to the
end, you see George Nelson getting marched through town.
On his way to the electric chair.
Yeah. He's going to get electrocuted. And people are in the background are shouting, "Cow killer!" And, he's talking about how lightning bolts are going to erupt from his fingertips and 20,000 volts is going to chase a rabbit through yours truly. So, I mean, yeah, there's definitely... that same device.
Yeah,
I guess.
Another connection here with
another
the
connection
Odyssey.
with the Odyssey.
So when do the sirens come in?
So the sirens
is that what comes in next?
Next.
All right.
Okay, we're finally I think on the same page.
Because that's one of I don't think it's the most famous part of the Odyssey, but it's one of the more famous parts.
Yes.
of
and
the
it's
Odyssey.
definitely one of the most iconic scenes in Oh Brother Where Art Thou.
Oh yeah, definitely. So after they rob a bank with George Nelson, they don't actually do anything, but George gives them part of the loot and a car to get away. And so they're driving down the road, and Pete says, just freaks out in the passenger seat. And he's like, "Stop, stop." And they start hearing this music from these laundry ladies that are the sirens, basically, right?
Yeah. In the Odyssey, the sirens are these terrifying monsters which look beautiful. They're they can disguise themselves to appear beautiful, and they sing. And they sing so beautifully that they lure men off of the boats into the water.
And they drown.
Where they drown and are eaten. And so Odysseus has his men stop their ears up with wax or something. They basically put earplugs in so that they can keep rowing and they don't hear the siren song to be lured by it. But actually what Odysseus wants to hear it.
Yeah.
And so he has his men tie him to the shipmast and swear to not untie him no matter what he says or does. And as you read through it, I mean, he starts like thrashing all about because he's trying to break his own arms off to get free so that he can jump into the water to be with these sirens because they're just so beautiful. Now, of course, if he were to do that, he would never come out again. And his men ignore him until they are well beyond the danger of these monsters. But in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, they're not going to eat the guys.
No. They're just going to rob them.
They're going to rob them. And turn them over to the sheriff again, right?
Yeah. What happens is they come in. They come into the story. They're singing. Pete races down to the water, and they play on the beauty of the three girls and how awestruck Pete, Delmar, and Everett are. And they try to introduce themselves, but the ladies, they stop them and get them drunk until they pass out.
Singing this really creepy song.
Oh yeah,
I mean it's
love
really
it, though.
Yeah, it's a fantastic song. But if you listen to the words, it's all about
it's terrifying.
Yeah. A lot about babies and
go to sleep, you little babe.
And then the devil, and,
Yeah, there's devil themes again, and
but
just basically fixating on the lust of the situation.
It's so catchy.
Oh,
so when they wake up the next morning, Pete is gone.
His clothes are there.
His clothes are still there, but Pete is gone, and in his place is
a horny toad.
A horny toad, which parallels once again something in the Odyssey. One of the other islands that Odysseus and his men come to is the island home of a witch named Circe. And one of the things that Circe does to Odysseus's men, the ones who haven't yet died, is turn them into animals, turn them into pigs or sheep or livestock, basically. So she doesn't turn them into frogs, but I suppose for Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, it served the narrative much better to be able to carry the animal around for a while.
Yeah, definitely. So they have no idea. They knew that they were robbed, but they had no idea that they had turned in Pete. So they
because that's what actually happened.
That's what actually happened.
Pete's been recaptured by the cops.
Yeah, and so they move on with this frog in tow
because Delmar is just convinced.
Oh yeah,
that
he even looks like Pete.
that Pete has been turned into a frog.
So yeah, I mean they're carrying him around in a shoebox, and they wind up at this restaurant. Where you are introduced to
my favorite character,
Big Dan.
Big Dan,
who's the Bible salesman, the quick-talking Bible salesman that I mentioned earlier, that is also blessed with the gift of gab,
with the eye patch.
Oh,
can't forget the eye patch.
Can't forget he has the eye patch, which kind of parallels another character in the Odyssey.
And that's I think the most famous story. If there's one part of the Odyssey that people know more than others, is the story of the Cyclops.
Yes.
Polyphemus, the Cyclops, the son of Poseidon, who is this massive, the Cyclops in Greek mythology are giants with one eye in the center of their forehead. And they are kind of brutal. They eat humans. And so Polyphemus captures Odysseus and his crew and keeps them hostage, basically, and eats them one by one.
Mm-hmm.
And Odysseus comes up with this really clever way to get free. By first, he blinds Polyphemus. He manages to get a really sharp stick and shove it into Polyphemus's eye. To blind him. Yep.
Okay.
What are you thinking?
I'm thinking of the flag.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll come up later.
And then after Polyphemus is blind, Odysseus and all of his men, they hide underneath the sheep they cling to the bellies of the sheep as the sheep are let out to graze, because Polyphemus can't see them, so he just kind of bends down and feels the sheep as he's letting them out of his cave to go eat grass,
just to make sure the people don't escape.
And meanwhile, Odysseus and his men are all clinging to the bellies of the sheep underneath, so he can't feel them. And then the best part, this is what I love about Odysseus, as they're fleeing, as they run to the ship and get away, Polyphemus realizes what's going on, and so he starts shouting for help. Like, help, help. And Odysseus had given Polyphemus the wrong name. Odysseus had told him that his name was Nobody, so not Odysseus. So the whole time Polyphemus has been calling Odysseus Nobody. So when Polyphemus starts yelling for help, help me, help me, nobody is hurting me, nobody is getting away. And so all these other Cyclops living on the other islands are like, great, good,
awesome.
I'm sorry that nobody is hurting you. Why are you crying about this if nobody's doing anything to you?
That is excellent.
And it gives them enough time to get away. And that's, in the Odyssey, the Cyclops, Polyphemus is Poseidon's son. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes Poseidon hate Odysseus. That's
Gotcha.
why Poseidon is like trying to get Odysseus back for the rest of the story.
Well, doesn't Polyphemus kill some of the crew?
Oh yeah, he full on eats them.
Full on eats, yeah, some of the crew. So I mean, in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? They were talking, and they're talking about Bible salesmen and the Cyclops. You know, Big Dan
with the eye patch
takes them out and starts beating the crap out of Delmar and Everett.
I mean, he's played by John Goodman, so he is not a small man.
He's not a small man. In fact, he has the full-on look of a Cyclops.
Yeah, he's big.
So I'm guessing, they don't come right out and say it, but he thinks that there's money in the shoebox where they're keeping Pete the horny toad, right? And he ends up crushing it. So, I mean, there's a parallel right there.
Yeah.
He kills, air quotes, one of Everett's crew and, just kind of runs off and says, it's the last you've seen of Big Dan T, right? And
which isn't true.
It's not true because the story carries on. Granted, we're going to kind of skip a few parts. They find out that Pete's not really dead.
Yeah.
He's in a chain gang, and they are able to talk to him in a movie house right after Everett sees his little girls perform on stage, and
learns that his wife is to be married.
Yeah, learns that his wife is to be married.
Oh, and they think that he was killed
and
by a train.
He was hit. Mama said you was hit by that train.
What? Wasn't hit by no train.
Yeah, it's like I'm right here in front of you. But anyway, they seem to be pretty excited that their mom is getting remarried to somebody who is bona fide. And, he's kind of fuming about it. He gets kicked out of a general store after he tries to fight off the suitor, who totally wallops him.
Yeah.
So he and Delmar are in the movie house kind of going over what's happening. And in marches the chain gang that happens to have Pete involved. And he's telling them to not seek the treasure as quietly as possible, kind of shouting throughout the entire movie house. So, and I know this is one of Anthony's favorite lines. Delmar looks at Pete and just starts saying, "We thought you was a toad."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a turning point in the movie because right after that they help Pete escape the penal farm once again. And as they are escaping, they come across a Klan rally, which is something we talked about with the Wizard of Oz earlier. Mm-hmm. They come to the same Klan rally.
And much to their surprise, they recognize someone. They actually end up recognizing a couple of people, but the Ku Klux Klan are planning on having a lynching, and it's none other than Tommy Johnson.
The guitar player that they picked up at the crossroads.
Yeah, and so the three guys, they end up trying to save Tommy and causing quite a lot of chaos and disaster.
Yeah, exactly. And you see one character with a single hole in his mask, in his KKK mask. I bet you can't guess who that one is.
I bet his name was Dan.
Big Dan T.
Who almost gets a big spike through his eye.
Yes. That's why I went, oh, earlier, because it clicked.
With all of the chaos. I mean, stuff's falling over. What is it? Is it it's a flag?
It is the Confederate flag that was in the ground. They picked it up and they... no, they were the color guard, so they had it, and it had a spike on the end, and they threw it back at him.
And it almost hits him in the eye.
He catches it.
And so you think it's going to be subverted, but then they drop a burning cross on his head. So...
like you do.
And, of course, it's, throughout this entire story, you have this campaign for governor that's been going on between Pappy O'Daniel and Homer Stokes.
Homer Stokes, yeah.
I actually wrote that down because last night when I was watching it again, I was like, oh, his name is Homer.
And
He
Homer...
wrote the Odyssey.
And I don't know. I mean, it's a kind of an odd form of tribute to make someone a KKK Grand Wizard. But Homer Stokes is like one of the worst villains in the movie because he's the leader of the KKK lynching.
Even though he stands up for the little man.
He stands up for the little man as long as he's white, I guess.
Yeah, it's more or less. He's got some of his reform.
And this ends up making a big
hullabaloo
at the climax of the movie. When the three guys finally do get home, or they get back to Everett's home, and Everett realizes that his wife isn't going to just take him back. They end up at this campaign rally
for Homer Stokes
as the Soggy Bottom Boys.
Yeah, who are dressed up as pretty much old beggars, right?
Yeah, they've got the big long beards on. They're dressed in really dirty clothes, just like how Odysseus disguised himself when he came home as an old beggar that nobody would recognize. Nobody recognizes them as the Soggy Bottom Boys because they're dressed up in these costumes until they start to sing. As soon as they start singing their song that has gone wild. People love this song. They had no idea. They've been running all over the place, burning barns down and stuff. Meanwhile, the song that they recorded has gone, for lack of a better term, viral.
Well, as viral as you can get in 1937.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And people go crazy. They're just so excited. It's the Soggy Bottom Boys.
I heard about them in Mobile.
And Homer Stokes, the racist jerk that he is, actually tries to stop the show. He says, oh, there's no way these boys are white. These boys are evil. We're going to put a stop to it. And he...
the crowd just starts booing.
They really turn on Homer Stokes. They start throwing things at him. They're throwing food at him.
Yeah, he deserved it.
Oh, sure. And they actually run him out of town on a big...
Basically a mast.
Basically like a ship's mast, like a big stick of wood. And...
Well, and the funny thing is, the man who's marrying, not Odysseus' wife, the man who's marrying Penny, who is Everett's wife.
Yeah, Penelope, which was also the name of Odysseus' wife in the Odyssey.
Is Homer Stokes' campaign advisor. Pappy O'Daniel is trying to get him to switch sides to help his campaign. So everybody's in the same room together.
Yeah, all of the people who haven't been crushed by burning crosses are there.
Pretty much.
And it's a really nice moment because Pappy O'Daniel sees how popular the Soggy Bottom Boys are, and so he kind of jumps on the opportunity to buy some goodwill with the crowd, and he gets up on stage and pardons all three of them, or all four of them, I guess.
Four of them.
Yeah, because Tommy's up there too. He grants them all full pardons, and to much acclaim, everybody's happy with Pappy, because he's already the governor. He's running for re-election, so that's why he has the power to do that.
To do this pardon. And he makes them their brain trust.
That's right. Yeah, he hires them. And his name, I mean, he goes by Pappy, but his first name is actually Menelaus, which is another character straight out of the Odyssey. Menelaus is one of the leaders that Odysseus fought with in the Greek, or in the Trojan War.
So they're pardoned. She finds out that maybe Everett is bona fide, right? And so he basically defeats the suitor not through fighting, but through like proving himself.
Yeah.
And just because of his good standing. I feel like Penny's a little bit shallow.
Yeah, I mean, it works for the narrative, I guess, to kind of to push the action along, but
yeah,
especially with what she then makes Everett do.
Oh yeah, she says that she will not marry him without the ring that she took off when they got divorced, when the divorce finally went through. So he has to go find the ring in the roll top desk at their old house, which is soon to be at the bottom of a reservoir. So he has to hurry up.
Yeah, because all through the movie, there's been this plot line mentioned in the background of a new dam being built, and they're going to stop up a river and
hydroelectricize the entire state of Mississippi.
And Everett's house just happens to be on the land that's about to be covered with water. So
that's why they have to get the treasure.
That's the pressing issue.
That's the cover story for him having to go home to stop this marriage. Is there's a treasure there, and they have to get it before this valley is flooded.
But it does make for a pretty nice turn for Everett's character, because all through the movie he's been real skeptical. He's been real critical of everybody who wants to talk about fate or faith or belief or anything. You know, he's unaffiliated, right? That's his constant line. But when they get to the house, they're finally cornered by Sheriff Cooley. He catches them.
He knew exactly where they were going to be, because when Pete was captured again, he gave up the location, and that's why he was telling them, do not seek the treasure.
But now he needs the ring, so he has to go there.
Exactly. So they are sitting there beneath the gallows. Everett decides to start praying.
Praise to God.
And
at that very moment,
the ground starts getting wet, and this big wave just comes in, washes everything away. Mm-hmm. Almost figuratively and almost figuratively, but definitely literally.
Definitely literally, yeah. I mean, there is a really nice parallel, I think, with how Pete and Delmar were baptized earlier, and now Everett's kind of baptized here. Yeah. But and he does kind of break down and praise to God, because he's got nowhere else to turn, and it might be a little bit of a Deus ex machina, but it works, I think. Yeah. Because then you get the blind man's prophecy finally coming true, because they see a cow floating.
Well, not even floating, just standing on the cotton house.
Standing on the cotton house as the waters rise.
So it kind of comes full circle. They're saved by a coffin.
Yeah.
And Tommy's saved by the roll top desk.
Roll top desk. That's what it's called. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it kind of just ties everything up in a nice little bow.
And this does have a parallel with the Odyssey in its own way. When Odysseus comes back and fights off the suitors, nobody recognizes him. The only person who does recognize him is his dog, which is a nice little detail. But before Penelope will believe that Odysseus is who he says he is, she gives him a test. He doesn't have to go do anything. He just has to answer some questions. But that's with a movie, it's a better way to tie up some of these loose ends of the story with Sheriff Cooley, to have the guys go to the house and get baptized with the floodwaters. But you do have the idea of Penelope or Penny challenging her husband before she will accept him again. That fits with the Odyssey too.
So, and then the very end, he finds out it's the wrong ring, and they have all 7 children in tow, and this is where you see the blind man on the handcart rolling his way out of town.
It's a really nice way of coming full circle, how it starts with the guys on the chain gang and the blind man on the cart, and then it finishes with the girls, not on a chain gang, but they're all tied to a piece of string or something.
Well, you can't have your children getting lost.
Yeah, it's like, I guess it's the 19th century version of leash children.
Yeah, pretty much.
And yeah, he rolls off into the distance.
Yeah, which is really nice, and it ties the movie up, and we are actually pretty close to the end of the episode. So, just a quick question: would you change anything in the movie, and who would you recommend it to?
I mean, honestly, I think this movie is so well written. How there's things that are hinted at the beginning that come full circle at the end. I honestly, I can't imagine how I would change anything. Just because if you change one thing, you would have to change. It would be like a domino effect. You'd have to change quite a few other things in order for the story to stay coherent.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Well put together.
Even more amazing music, maybe. I can't get enough of that.
Add more music.
There's nothing more that I love than really clever writing, and I feel like this movie has so much of it that it just keeps you enticed the entire time.
And that's one thing that the Coen Brothers are always good for, is really clever writing. Mm-hmm. As far as who I would recommend it to, I think I would recommend it to somebody who would appreciate clever writing. I mean, if you're looking for an action-packed free-for-all, I mean, that's not this movie. It has action in it. It's got some funny jokes in it, but it's the kind of movie that you
watch for the story.
Yeah, and it's you can have it on in the background, but it's not really that kind of movie. It's the kind of movie you want to sit and watch and pay attention to, because otherwise it's not really going to make sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that you can miss. In fact, let me see, I've watched this maybe a dozen times, and I'm still picking up new things.
Yeah. So I don't think kids would really appreciate it. I just don't think they would care. It's not really a scary movie. The Ku Klux Klan scene's kind of intense, but I just don't think kids would care about it because it's a lot of just adults talking.
Yeah.
But it does have, I mean, there are some really funny parts in it.
Oh, yeah.
Babyface Nelson's hilarious.
Yes.
And so, yeah, anybody who is excited to sit and appreciate a very well-written movie, that's who I think this movie would be for.
And I think anyone who likes, music in general would just love this movie.
The soundtrack's good for anybody. No question.
So, Garrett, anything you would change?
Not that I can really think of off the top of my head. I mean, I haven't sat down and analyzed it as much as other people have. So just off the top of my head, I don't think that there's anything that I could think to change.
I love the soundtrack, and I don't think I would really change much either. I mean, the cinematography is great.
Oh, that was one of
very
the
good. Yeah,
it was nominated for an Oscar. For the cinematography.
I mean,
it
the
didn't
colors,
win,
the whole feel of the movie is just spot on.
It looks like an old picture.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks weathered,
very sepia.
Yeah, very brown, yellow.
But yeah, I love it, and I recommend it to anybody who just loves a good story. I mean, it's one of the oldest stories if you really look at it.
Yep. And for maybe would you recommend it to high school freshmen who have to read the Odyssey?
Definitely.
Now, it's not.
I'd recommend this podcast to those kids too.
Yeah, because I mean, the Odyssey is not the same thing as Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? I mean,
no.
the order's different, the characters are different, but it is a perfect example of Tolkien's idea of the Story Cauldron, because they're taking these ideas and these names and these events and mixing them up and adding a dash of blues and soul and Mississippi, and out pops this new thing, and we call it Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
So I guess with that, we'll finish up. Thanks for joining us today on the Story Cauldron, and I have to mention, the music in this episode is from the band Hook Sounds.
Be sure to look for us on Instagram at The Story Cauldron and Twitter, Story Cauldron. You can find us on Facebook and iTunes. And please, if you've got a minute, give us a review. Tell us what you think, and tell us what movies you would like us to read next.
It helps other people find our podcast and keeps us out of the penal farms. We hope you enjoyed the breakdown of the Coen Brothers
and Homer's
Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And until next time,
bye.